The ancient death world of Caliban exists now only in memory and fragmented records, its final moments captured in a cataclysm that tore the planet apart during the closing days of the Horus Heresy. Yet before its destruction, this verdant, dangerous world gave birth to one of the most secretive and complex figures in Imperial history, the one known simply as Cypher. To understand this enigmatic individual, we must first understand the world that shaped him and the organizations that defined Calibanite society before the coming of the Emperor. Caliban was classified as a death world with good reason. Its vast, dark forests teemed with monstrous predators, mutated beasts twisted by warp energies that seeped into the planet's ecosystem. These creatures, collectively known as the Great Beasts, terrorized human settlements and forced Calibanite society to develop a unique cultural response. The population gathered in scattered fortress monasteries, heavily fortified against the dangers lurking beyond their walls. From these bastions emerged the knightly orders, warrior brotherhoods dedicated to hunting the great beasts and protecting what remained of human civilization on this harsh world. Among these orders, one rose to prominence above all others, simply known as the Order. Founded by the legendary Calibanite knight Luther, the Order became the most prestigious and powerful knightly brotherhood on the planet. Their fortress monastery stood as the pinnacle of human achievement on Caliban, and their organizational structure would later influence the very command hierarchy of the Dark Angels Legion. Within the Order's rigid structure existed a position of unique significance, the Lord Cypher. Unlike most knightly positions that focused on martial prowess or leadership in battle, the Lord Cypher served as the keeper of traditions, the guardian of ancient lore, and most importantly, the custodian of the Order's most closely guarded secrets. The title itself derived from ancient Calibanite dialect, where cipher referred not merely to codes or encryption, but to the concept of hidden knowledge itself, truths deemed too dangerous or powerful for common understanding. The Lord Cypher's chambers within the Order's fortress monastery contained ancient texts, relics, and records dating back to the earliest days of human settlement on Caliban. This individual was tasked with preserving the cultural continuity of the Order through rituals, ceremonies, and the transmission of secret knowledge to worthy successors. In a society where survival depended on maintaining traditions that had proven effective against the great beasts, the Lord Cypher held immense cultural significance. When a young, feral child was discovered in the forests of Caliban by Luther himself, the foundations of this society would be forever altered. This child, who would be named Lion Eljohnson, the Lion, son of the forest, possessed superhuman abilities that marked him as something beyond ordinary humanity. Luther adopted the Lion as his son and introduced him to the Order, where the young Primarch's tactical genius and combat prowess quickly elevated him to leadership positions. The historical records regarding the identity of the Lord Cypher during this crucial period remain deliberately obscured. Some fragmentary accounts suggest that before Luther held the position of Grand Master of the Order, he may have served as Lord Cypher himself, which would explain his intimate knowledge of Calibanite lore and traditions. Other sources indicate that the position was held by an individual whose name has been meticulously erased from all records, possibly by the Dark Angels themselves in the aftermath of later events. What is certain is that the relationship between Lion Eljohnson and Luther began to show signs of strain as the Lion Star continued to rise. When the Emperor discovered Caliban during the Great Crusade, recognizing Lion Eljohnson as one of his lost Primarchs, the societal structures of Caliban underwent rapid transformation. The Order was absorbed into the newly formed First Legion, with the Lion taking command as its Primarch. Luther, despite his adoptive father status, found himself in the shadow of his superhuman son. During this transition, the traditional role of Lord Cypher appears to have been maintained within the early structure of the Dark Angels Legion. The position evolved from keeper of knightly traditions to guardian of the Legion's growing body of secrets. As the Great Crusade progressed, the Dark Angels developed a reputation for secretiveness that set them apart from their brother legions, a characteristic that can be traced directly back to Calibanite cultural practices and the influence of the Lord Cypher's position. The Lion's decision to leave Luther behind on Caliban with a contingent of dark angels marked a critical juncture in their relationship. While the Primarch led the majority of his legion in the Emperor's Great Crusade across the stars, Luther was tasked with recruiting and training new Astartes from among Caliban's population. This separation, perceived by many as a demotion for Luther, planted seeds of resentment that would later bear bitter fruit. During this period of separation, the role of Lord Cypher on Caliban gained new dimensions. With Luther effectively governing the Dark Angel's homeworld, the Lord Cypher became increasingly involved in matters beyond mere tradition-keeping. Archaeological evidence recovered from Caliban's remains suggests that expeditions were launched into the deepest parts of the planet's forests, uncovering ancient structures and artifacts of unknown origin. These discoveries may have included technologies or knowledge from the Dark Age of technology, or possibly even older secrets related to the warp-tainted nature of Caliban itself. The identity of the Lord Cypher during this critical period remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in Imperial history. Some inquisitorial theories suggest that the position may have been held by multiple individuals in quick succession, as knowledge deemed dangerous by the Lion was compartmentalized and distributed among trusted officers. Others believe that a single individual held the title throughout, someone with connections to both Luther and the Lion, positioned to understand the growing rift between them. What is clear from surviving records is that the Lord Cypher had access to secure vaults deep beneath the Order's fortress monastery. These vaults, later incorporated into the Dark Angel's fortress of Aljuruk, contained artifacts and texts that predated human settlement on Caliban. Some of these relics bore symbols and designs consistent with those found in other locations tainted by warp influence, suggesting a connection between Caliban's mutated beasts and some ancient corruption embedded in the planet itself. As the Horus Heresy erupted across the galaxy, the Lion's absence from Caliban created a vacuum that Luther and his followers filled with their own interpretation of events. Cut off from reliable information about the conflict, Luther became increasingly paranoid and susceptible to whispers of dissent. The exact role the Lord Cypher played in these developments remains contested, but fragmentary evidence suggests that the Keeper of Secrets may have been instrumental in either fanning the flames of rebellion or attempting to prevent the coming catastrophe. The cultural significance of the Lord Cypher position cannot be overstated in understanding the eventual fall of Caliban. In Calibanite society, knowledge was power in the most literal sense, the difference between survival and death against the great beasts. The Lord Cypher controlled access to the most ancient and potent knowledge, determining which secrets could be shared and which must remain hidden. This gatekeeping role placed the position at the center of Calibanite power structures long before the coming of the Imperium. When Luther finally broke with the Lion's authority, declaring independence from what he perceived as a corrupted Imperium, the Lord Cypher would have been a critical figure in this rebellion. Whether as instigator, participant, or opponent, whoever held this title possessed knowledge that could legitimize or undermine Luther's claims. The ancient texts and relics under the Lord Cypher's guardianship could provide context for the warp storms engulfing the galaxy and the rumors of brother fighting brother among the Space Marine legions. The fateful return of Lion El'Jansen to Caliban marked the beginning of the end for the Death World. Finding his adopted father in open rebellion, the Primarch's fleet bombarded the planet from orbit before the Lion personally led an assault on the Order's fortress. The confrontation between Luther and the Lion has passed into legend, a duel of not just weapons but ideologies, culminating in a psychic explosion that tore Caliban apart and scattered the Dark Angels who had sided with Luther across time and space. In the aftermath of this cataclysm, as the shattered Dark Angels' legion struggled to make sense of what had occurred, reports began to emerge of a mysterious figure moving among the stars. Clad in the black armor of the fallen angels, but bearing the robes of ancient Calibanite tradition, this individual carried a sword believed by some to be the Lion's own blade and a pistol of archaic design. Most distinctively, this figure bore the symbols and accoutrements associated with the position of Lord Cypher from the Order's hierarchy. Whether this individual was the same Lord Cypher who had served during Luther's rebellion, or someone who had taken up the mantle afterward, remains unknown. What became increasingly clear to the Dark Angels was that this figure, now known simply as Cypher, possessed knowledge that threatened the very foundation of their legion's honor. The hunt for Cypher and the other fallen angels became the Dark Angels' all-consuming secret mission, a quest for redemption that continues to the present day. The enigma of Caliban thus extends far beyond the Death World's physical destruction. In the figure of Cypher, the cultural memory of Caliban persists, a walking embodiment of secrets that the Dark Angels have spent 10,000 years trying to contain. The title that once denoted the Keeper of Traditions has become synonymous with betrayal in the eyes of the unforgiven, while to others, Cypher represents a truth too dangerous to be acknowledged. The hierarchical structure of the First Legion during the Great Crusade preserved many elements of the Order's organization, including specialized inner circles with increasing levels of access to the Legion's secrets. This structure, which would later evolve into the Inner Circle of the Dark Angels chapter, bears the unmistakable imprint of Calibanite tradition and the influence of the Lord Cypher's role in managing dangerous knowledge. The modern Dark Angels maintain specialized companies and officers dedicated to the preservation of their secrets, echoing the function that the Lord Cypher once served. The seeds of betrayal planted on Caliban would bear bitter fruit as the galaxy descended into the madness of the Horus Heresy. While Lion El'Jonson led the bulk of his Dark Angels against traitor forces across distant stars, Luther remained on Caliban with a contingent of legionaries deemed either too inexperienced for frontline combat or, in some cases, no longer in the Lion's favor. This separation, initially practical in nature, created the perfect conditions for resentment to fester and grow. As news of Horus's rebellion reached Caliban, it arrived in fragments and distortions. The warp storms that characterized this tumultuous period made astropathic communication unreliable at best, leaving Luther and his followers isolated and dependent on sporadic reports from passing ships. This information vacuum proved dangerous, allowing Luther to craft his own narrative about the events unfolding across the Imperium. Luther's growing paranoia found fertile ground in the ancient traditions of Caliban. The Order had always maintained a degree of insularity, valuing self-sufficiency and independence. Now, with the Imperium apparently tearing itself apart, Luther began to question whether Caliban's integration into the wider galaxy had been beneficial at all. He spoke increasingly of Caliban's destiny as separate from the Imperium's fate, drawing on cultural memories of independence that predated imperial compliance. The fallen angels, though they would not bear this name until after their defeat, gathered around Luther not as conscious traitors, but as loyal sons of Caliban who believed the planet's interests diverged from those of a failing Imperium. Their descent into outright rebellion occurred gradually, with each step seeming reasonable in isolation. First came increased security measures, then restrictions on off-world communications, followed by the redeployment of Calibanite defense forces under Luther's direct command. Throughout this period, the warp's influence on Caliban grew stronger. The planet had always harbored a connection to the Immaterium, evident in the mutated great beasts that roamed its forests, but now this taint intensified. Deep in the ancient forests, where even the Knights of the Order had rarely ventured, strange phenomena manifested. Witnesses reported lights dancing between trees, unnatural growths appearing overnight, and whispers that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. These manifestations represented the interest of chaos in Caliban and its potential as a staging ground for corruption within the Dark Angels Legion. The ruinous powers recognized the opportunity presented by Luther's isolation and resentment. They did not approach him directly with offers of power, as they had with other traitors, but instead worked subtly through artifacts and ancient texts uncovered in Caliban's depths. The Lord Cypher of this period, whether the same individual who would later become the enigmatic Cypher of later millennia or a predecessor, played a crucial role in these excavations. Responsible for the Order's archives and relics, this figure had access to chambers beneath the fortress monastery that predated human settlement on Caliban. Some fragmentary accounts suggest that expeditions into these depths uncovered technology and knowledge from the Dark Age of technology, possibly even older artifacts connected to the warp. Luther's inner circle began studying these discoveries, initially with scholarly interest that gradually transformed into obsession. The knowledge contained in these ancient repositories offered perspectives on the warp that contradicted imperial truth, suggesting ways to harness its power rather than shun it as dangerous. For warriors raised in a tradition of confronting and overcoming dangerous beasts, the idea of mastering rather than avoiding the warp held particular appeal. The corruption of Luther and his followers did not manifest in obvious physical mutations or the adoption of chaos iconography that characterized other traitor forces. Instead, it appeared as a subtle shift in philosophy, a willingness to use forbidden knowledge, to question established imperial dogma, and ultimately to place Caliban's independence above loyalty to the emperor or the lion. This ideological corruption proved more insidious than obvious physical taint, allowing the rebellion to grow without triggering immediate alarm. By the time Luther openly declared Caliban's independence, many of his followers had been exposed to chaos influence through the artifacts and texts they studied. Their minds had been prepared through a careful campaign of misinformation about the heresy, suggesting that both the emperor and the lion had betrayed the ideals of the Great Crusade. In this environment of suspicion and paranoia, Luther positioned himself as Caliban's protector against outside threats, including the possible return of the lion, whom he now characterized as an agent of a corrupted imperium. The exact role of the Lord Cypher in these developments remains contested in imperial records. Some accounts portray this figure as Luther's chief enabler, providing access to forbidden knowledge and encouraging his break with imperial authority. Others suggest a more complex position, perhaps attempting to moderate Luther's growing radicalism while preserving crucial knowledge that might otherwise be destroyed in the coming conflict. The truth likely contains elements of both narratives, reflecting the moral ambiguity that has characterized Cypher throughout his long history. As the heresy reached its climax with Horus's assault on Terra, Luther completed his preparations for Caliban's defense. The planet's orbital batteries were strengthened and reoriented to target approaching imperial vessels rather than external threats. The fortress monastery of the Dark Angels was fortified further, drawing on both standard imperial military engineering and more esoteric defenses derived from the ancient knowledge Luther's followers had uncovered. Psychic rituals, conducted in chambers deep beneath the fortress, created warp-based protections that would prove devastatingly effective when the final confrontation came. The Lion's return to Caliban occurred as the heresy was concluding elsewhere. Having fought traitor forces across multiple systems, the Primarch and his fleet approached their homeworld expecting a hero's welcome and reinforcements. Instead, they were met with the fire of defensive batteries. The Lion's initial confusion quickly gave way to fury as he realized the scale of Luther's betrayal. The Dark Angels' fleet responded with their own bombardment, targeting military installations while attempting to minimize damage to civilian areas. This exchange of fire marked the beginning of Caliban's end. The planet's surface, already weakened by extensive mining and the excavation of ancient chambers, began to show signs of instability. Warp energies contained for millennia within the planet's core surged in response to the violence above. The bombardment breached several containment fields established by ancient technologies, releasing forces that had been carefully imprisoned since before human settlement. The Lion, recognizing the deteriorating situation but determined to confront Luther personally, led an assault force to the surface. Fighting through layers of defenders, he reached the inner sanctum of the fortress monastery where Luther awaited. The confrontation between these once brothers has been recounted in various forms across the millennia, with details shifting depending on the source. What remains consistent is that their duel transcended mere physical combat, incorporating elements of psychic warfare as Luther drew on powers granted by his chaos patrons. As the duel reached its climax, Luther, enhanced by warp energies but still fundamentally human, managed to wound the Primarch. This momentary advantage triggered a crisis of conscience. Faced with the opportunity to kill the being he had once raised as a son, Luther hesitated. This hesitation proved crucial, allowing the Lion to regain the upper hand. Yet before the Primarch could deliver a final blow, Luther's Chaos patrons intervened directly. A massive psychic explosion erupted from the duelists, tearing through the fortress and extending into the planet itself. This cataclysmic release of energy interacted with the already unstable warp containment beneath Caliban, creating a cascading failure that would ultimately tear the planet apart. In those final moments, as reality itself seemed to buckle, the figure who was or would become Cypher made a fateful decision. Fragmentary accounts from Dark Angels who survived the destruction suggest that amidst the chaos, a figure matching Cypher's description was seen entering the chamber where Luther and the Lion fought. Some versions claim he attempted to intervene in the duel. Others suggest he sought only to retrieve certain artifacts before the fortress's destruction. What is documented with more certainty is that this figure emerged from the chamber carrying a sword of distinctive design, believed by many to be the Lion's own blade, and fled deeper into the crumbling fortress. The warp storm that consumed Caliban grew in intensity, creating a temporal and spatial distortion that scattered the rebel Dark Angels across time and space. These fallen angels would materialize in different eras and locations throughout the subsequent millennia, some appearing thousands of years after the event that displaced them, with no subjective experience of the intervening time. This diaspora ensured that the truth of what occurred on Caliban would remain fragmented, with each fallen carrying only pieces of the larger narrative. Cypher's disappearance during this cataclysm represents one of the most significant mysteries surrounding the fall of Caliban. Unlike many fallen who would later be captured and forced to confess by Dark Angel's interrogator chaplains, Cypher appears to have maintained his freedom and purpose throughout the millennia that followed. His first confirmed post-heresy sighting occurred approximately 200 years after Caliban's destruction, on a frontier world in the Segmentum Obscurus. This initial sighting established the pattern that would characterize Cypher's appearances over the following millennia. Imperial authorities reported a figure in ancient Dark Angel's armor, modified to remove identifying markings, moving through a war zone with apparent disregard for the conflict around him. Witnesses noted his distinctive armament, a sword carried on his back that he never drew, and an ancient pattern bolt pistol and plasma pistol used with remarkable accuracy. Most significantly, his passage coincided with the recovery of several artifacts from a pre-imperial ruin, suggesting a continuing mission related to ancient knowledge. Subsequent sightings across the next several centuries revealed a consistent pattern of behavior. Cypher appeared most frequently near sites of archaeological significance, particularly those connected to the Dark Age of technology or earlier human settlements. He showed no consistent allegiance to either Imperial or Chaos forces, sometimes aiding one side before disappearing or switching sides entirely. The only constant appeared to be his movement, always traveling, never establishing a permanent base, and seemingly guided by some internal compass pointing toward an unknown destination. The Dark Angel's response to these sightings was immediate and severe. The newly organized chapter, structured around the inner circle that preserved the secret of the fallen, dispatched hunt teams wherever Cypher was reported. These efforts proved consistently unsuccessful, with Cypher demonstrating an uncanny ability to evade capture. Some accounts suggest he possessed knowledge of Dark Angel's protocols that allowed him to anticipate their movements, while others attribute his escapes to technological aids or warp-based abilities gained during Caliban's fall. Conflicting accounts of Cypher's role during Luther's betrayal began to emerge as the Dark Angels captured other Fallen and subjected them to interrogation. Some prisoners described Cypher as Luther's chief advisor, the architect of many aspects of the rebellion, who had provided access to forbidden knowledge that accelerated their fall. Others portrayed him as a reluctant participant, a figure who had attempted to moderate Luther's growing extremism while preserving crucial knowledge that might otherwise be lost. Most intriguing were the accounts that suggested Cypher had operated as a double agent throughout the conflict. These narratives, dismissed by most Dark Angel's leadership as self-serving lies, claim that Cypher had maintained secret communication with loyalist forces, attempting to prevent the worst excesses of Luther's rebellion while gathering intelligence on Chaos influence. Some even suggested that his mission after Caliban's destruction represented the continuation of orders received directly from the lion before the final confrontation. The physical evidence recovered from Caliban's remains did little to clarify these contradictions. Excavations of the asteroid field that once constituted the planet revealed fragments of the fortress monastery, including chambers associated with the Lord Cypher's traditional domain. These rooms showed signs of deliberate destruction beyond that caused by the planet's collapse, data storage devices wiped clean, relics removed, and in some cases, evidence of targeted explosives used to seal certain areas permanently. As the scattered remnants of Caliban drifted through the void, a new figure emerged from the ashes of betrayal, neither fully loyal nor entirely traitorous. Cypher's physical appearance has remained remarkably consistent across thousands of years of reported sightings, suggesting either extraordinary longevity or a mantle passed between multiple individuals. He stands at the height typical of an Astartes, clad in black power armor of ancient Mark IV or V pattern that bears no chapter insignia or identifying markings. The armor itself shows signs of extensive modification and repair, with components dating from different eras seamlessly integrated into the original frame. Most distinctive in Cypher's appearance is the hooded robe worn over his armor, a direct callback to the traditional garb of the Lord Cypher of the Order on ancient Caliban. The fabric appears to be made of a dark, almost light-absorbing material that obscures his features and helmet details. When the hood is drawn back, as reported by the few witnesses who have survived close encounters, his face remains hidden behind an ornate helm of pre-heresy design, its eye lenses emitting a faint green glow that recalls the forests of his lost homeworld. The sword carried on Cypher's back represents perhaps the most intriguing element of his wargear. Never drawn in 10,000 years of recorded encounters, this weapon is secured in an ornate scabbard of apparent Calibanite craftsmanship. The visible hilt matches descriptions of the Lion Sword, the personal weapon of Lion El'Jonson that disappeared during the final confrontation with Luther. Alternative theories suggest it may be the Sword of Luther, a weapon of unknown origin that the former Grand Master wielded during his rebellion. Inquisitorial analyses of Pict captures have revealed power field emitters built into the scabbard itself, suggesting the blade remains battle-ready despite never being drawn. The significance of this perpetually sheathed weapon extends beyond mere symbolism. Psychic interrogation of captured fallen angels has yielded conflicting accounts of its purpose. Some claim Cypher carries the sword to Terra, where he intends to lay it before the Golden Throne as an offering of redemption. Others insist the blade contains a fragment of Caliban's essence, preserved from the Cataclysm, and that drawing it would trigger a second catastrophe. The Dark Angels themselves appear to believe the sword represents proof of the First Legion's shame, physical evidence of the betrayal that must never come to light. In stark contrast to the unused sword, Cypher's pistols have claimed countless lives across the millennia. His standard loadout consists of an archaic bolt pistol in his right hand and a plasma pistol of unknown pattern in his left. The bolt pistol appears to be a custom-crafted Mark II Angelus pattern, favored by Dark Angels officers during the Great Crusade. The plasma pistol bears technical hallmarks suggesting Dark Age of technology origins, with a stabilization system that prevents the overheating issues common to Imperial plasma weapons. Contrary to popular depictions in Imperial propaganda that often show him wielding twin bolt pistols, Cypher's actual combat methodology relies on the complementary nature of his two different sidearms. The bolt pistol provides reliable, armor-piercing firepower at medium range, while the plasma pistol delivers devastating energy bursts capable of vaporizing even Terminator armor at close quarters. Battlefield forensics indicate Cypher alternates between weapons with preternatural speed, selecting the optimal tool for each target with unerring precision. Inquisitorial battle reports describe Cypher's combat style as methodical yet fluid, displaying none of the berserker rage or fanaticism common to many chaos-tainted warriors. He moves with the calculated efficiency of a veteran Astartes, utilizing terrain and cover with tactical brilliance while maintaining constant situational awareness. Unlike many Fallen who fight with desperate fury when cornered, Cypher appears to approach combat as a means to an end rather than an opportunity for glory or vengeance. His marksmanship borders on the supernatural, with confirmed kills at ranges exceeding the theoretical maximum for the weapons he carries. During the Vitruvian uprising in the 37th millennium, Imperial Guard spotters documented Cypher eliminating 19 cult leaders with 19 shots across a 3-kilometer killing field, despite adverse atmospheric conditions that should have rendered such accuracy impossible. Similar reports from the Orpheus sector describe him firing without looking at targets, yet still achieving perfect shot placement through what observers described as impossible intuition. Beyond his primary weapons, Cypher carries an assortment of grenades and auxiliary devices that vary between sightings. Frag, crack, and photon flash grenades appear most commonly, though he has also employed rare archaeotech devices with effects ranging from localized time dilation to targeted teleportation. His belt typically holds several pouches containing specialized ammunition, including rare Hellfire rounds and the distinctive blue-tinged bolt shells associated with ancient Dark Angels munitions forged on Caliban. Curiously absent from Cypher's arsenal are the ritual weapons favored by other fallen angels. He carries no Crozius, no ceremonial blade, no demon-infused artifact. This notable absence of chaos paraphernalia has fueled speculation about his true allegiance. Even in encounters where he has fought alongside chaos forces, Cypher maintains this separation, never adopting their iconography or ritualistic combat methods. Cypher's tactical approach reveals a mind trained in Dark Angel's doctrine, but evolved through millennia of independent operation. He favors rapid strikes followed by immediate withdrawal, never remaining in one location longer than necessary to accomplish his objectives. When forced into prolonged engagements, he creates layered fallback positions and escape routes, often incorporating environmental hazards or third-party forces to cover his eventual extraction. The Ordo Malleus has documented several instances where Cypher appeared to deliberately manipulate opposing forces into conflict with each other, creating diversions that allowed him to access restricted areas or recover specific artifacts. During the Macharian heresy, he was observed providing critical intelligence to loyalist forces about heretic positions, only to use the resulting assault as cover to infiltrate a sealed pre-imperial vault. Similar patterns emerged during the Gothic War, where he alternately aided both Imperial and Chaos forces in what appeared to be a complex operation to access Blackstone Fortress command systems. Battlefield recordings reveal Cypher's apparent immunity to certain types of warp phenomena. During the Abyssal Crusade, he was observed walking unharmed through a Tzynkian change field that transformed everything else in its radius. On Cadia, before its fall, he reportedly passed through a Geller field failure zone without suffering the usual warp exposure effects. These incidents have led some inquisitors to theorize that Cypher possesses some form of natural warp resistance or protective technology beyond current Imperial understanding. Psychic interrogation of those who have encountered Cypher yields consistently unusual results. Telepaths report difficulty maintaining focus on him, describing his mental presence as slippery or fragmented. Battle psychers who have attempted to target him with witchfire or other offensive powers describe their abilities sliding away from him as if deflected by an invisible barrier. This apparent resistance does not manifest as the blank aura associated with Sisters of Silence or other pariahs. Instead, it presents as a more subtle distortion that renders psychic powers unreliable rather than nullified. The Ordo Chronos, before its disappearance, maintained a special file on Cypher based on temporal anomalies associated with his movements. Their records noted instances where he appeared simultaneously in multiple locations across the galaxy, or materialized in sealed environments without triggering security systems. These reports suggested either technology capable of circumventing normal space-time limitations, or the possibility that multiple individuals operate under the Cypher identity, though the consistent fighting style and weapon preferences argue against the latter theory. Most intriguing is the pattern of energy signatures detected in Cypher's wake. Mechanicus Auspex readings taken after his appearances show distinctive radiation patterns consistent with certain Dark Age technologies, particularly those associated with non-Gellar field warp transit methods. Some tech priests have theorized that Cypher utilizes a personal teleportation system based on principles different from standard Imperial teleporters, possibly incorporating limited temporal displacement that allows him to step briefly outside normal time flow during transit. The Dark Angels and their successor chapters have accumulated the most comprehensive data on Cypher's combat capabilities, though they guard this information jealously. Internal chapter records, glimpsed only through the most highly placed inquisitorial agents, suggest that Cypher demonstrates intimate knowledge of Dark Angels' combat doctrines, including counter-tactics specifically designed to neutralize their specialized units. When confronted by Deathwing Terminators, he employs movement patterns that exploit the limitations of their heavy armor. Against Ravenwing pursuers, he utilizes terrain features and urban environments that negate their speed advantage. This intimate knowledge extends to Dark Angels' chapter organization and protocols. Multiple pursuit operations have been compromised when Cypher demonstrated awareness of contingency plans and extraction procedures that should have been known only to the inner circle. In the Veiled Region campaign, he reportedly transmitted Dark Angels' identification codes to bypass defensive positions, using authentication sequences that had been obsolete for millennia but were still recognized by ancient security systems. Despite his formidable combat abilities, Cypher appears to prefer avoidance over confrontation when dealing with Imperial forces, particularly the Dark Angels. Battlefield recordings show him prioritizing escape routes and disengagement tactics when cornered by Astartes. When forced to fight, he targets weapons, mobility systems, and communications equipment rather than executing killing shots, suggesting a reluctance to slay his former brothers. This pattern changes markedly when facing Chaos forces, against whom he demonstrates lethal efficiency with no apparent hesitation. The psychological impact of Cypher's appearance cannot be overstated, particularly for the Dark Angels. His mere presence on a battlefield triggers immediate protocol shifts, with specialized hunt teams diverted from primary objectives to pursue him regardless of strategic cost. This reaction has been exploited on multiple occasions, with Cypher drawing Dark Angels' forces away from critical positions and creating vulnerabilities that other factions have capitalized upon. Whether these instances represent deliberate tactics or merely opportunistic exploitation remains unclear. Among the fallen angels themselves, Cypher occupies an ambiguous position. Interrogation of captured Fallen reveals widely divergent opinions about his nature and purpose. Some view him as a betrayer who abandoned Luther's cause at the critical moment, while others describe him as a figure of salvation who guides worthy Fallen toward redemption. A significant minority express genuine fear, describing Cypher as something beyond a mere Astartes, a vessel for Caliban's dying curse, or an embodiment of judgment for those who broke their oaths. The material composition of Cypher's wargear provides additional clues to his origins and capabilities. Microscopic analysis of bolt casings recovered from sites of his appearances shows metallurgical patterns consistent with Calibanite forge techniques from the Great Crusade era, suggesting either an enormous stockpile of original ammunition or access to production facilities that can replicate these ancient methods. The power readings from his plasma weapon exceed standard Imperial output by approximately 37%, indicating either master-crafted construction or modifications beyond current Mechanicus understanding. For 10 millennia, the Dark Angels have pursued the Fallen with a single-minded obsession that transcends all other duties and obligations. What began as a desperate attempt to contain knowledge of their legion's shame has evolved into an institutional paranoia that defines the chapter's very identity. At the heart of this endless pursuit stands the most elusive quarry of all, the mysterious figure known as Cypher. The hunt for the Fallen is not conducted by the entirety of the Dark Angels chapter, but rather by specialized formations operating under the authority of the Inner Circle. Chief among these are the Deathwing and Ravenwing companies, each with distinct roles in the identification, pursuit, and capture of their traitorous brethren. This specialized organizational structure has been meticulously refined over millennia to maximize efficiency in what the Dark Angels refer to in coded communications as the Hunt. The Raven Wing, comprising the second company of the Dark Angels and their successor chapters, serves as the vanguard of this endless pursuit. Mounted on specialized assault bikes, land speeders, and other rapid attack vehicles, these black-armored hunters operate with a level of autonomy unusual for Codex-compliant chapters. Their primary mission is to locate and confirm the presence of fallen angels, then contain the situation until the Deathwing can be deployed. Ravenwing squadrons maintain constant patrols throughout Imperial space, following intelligence gathered by the chapter's extensive network of informants and monitoring systems. Each Black Knight has undergone extensive training in tracking techniques, from analyzing warp signature residue to identifying the distinctive combat patterns associated with fallen angels. Their equipment includes specialized Auspex devices calibrated to detect energy signatures linked to Calibanic technology and arcane data scramblers that erase evidence of their quarry from Imperial records. The Deathwing represents the hammer to the Ravenwing scout knife. Composed entirely of Terminator armored veterans, the first company deploys only after a fallen angel's presence has been confirmed. Their bone-white armor, a stark contrast to the chapter's traditional dark green, serves as a reminder of a near-forgotten incident on the planet Plains End, where a small contingent of Terminators repainted their armor to bone white before sacrificing themselves against a Genestealer infestation. This color now symbolizes the Deathwing's willingness to sacrifice everything to protect the chapter's honor. Deathwing Terminators operate with unique deployment protocols when pursuing the fallen. Rather than utilizing traditional drop pods or Thunderhawks, they employ ancient teleportation technology to materialize directly at target locations, minimizing the chance for escape. Each squad carries specialized restraint equipment designed to incapacitate rather than kill their targets, including neural shredders, stasis bombs, and gravitic snares dating back to Dark Age technologies preserved within the rock. The Inner Circle's knowledge regarding Cypher remains compartmentalized even within these specialized hunt teams. Only the Supreme Grand Master and his most trusted advisors possess the complete dossier on this enigmatic figure. Lower-ranking members of the Deathwing and Ravenwing operate with limited information, typically only tactical data about Cypher's combat capabilities and last known whereabouts, without context regarding his significance or true identity. This information restriction extends to the chapter's interrogator chaplains, who specialize in extracting confessions from captured fallen. These grim officials know that Cypher represents the most important quarry in their endless hunt, but many remain unaware of the specific secrets he carries. This compartmentalization serves both practical security purposes and maintains the chapter's complex system of progressive revelation, where warriors learn more of their dark heritage only as they rise through the ranks. The rank and file battle brothers of the Dark Angels and their successor chapters remain almost entirely ignorant of Cypher's existence. They know nothing of the fallen angels or the true fate of Caliban, instead believing their homeworld was destroyed by an unfortunate warp storm during the Horus Heresy. When deployed to zones where Cypher has been sighted, these warriors receive only the most basic operational briefings, often under false pretenses involving pursuit of conventional enemies. Throughout the millennia, the Dark Angels have come tantalizingly close to capturing Cypher on numerous occasions, only to have him slip through their grasp under circumstances that often defy explanation. These near captures have occurred across the breadth of Imperial space, from the Gothic sector to the Eastern Fringe, each following a similar pattern that has led some within the Inner Circle to suspect deliberate manipulation. One of the earliest documented near captures occurred during the 32nd millennium on the fortress world of Delphius IV. A Ravenwing strike force, responding to reports of a figure matching Cypher's description, cornered their quarry in an ancient archaeotech vault deep beneath the planet's primary hive city. Witnesses reported that the Ravenwing had established a perfect cordon, with all escape routes covered and teleport jammers active. As the Black Knights closed in, the vault's ancient security systems mysteriously activated, sealing the primary access points and triggering a radiation purge that forced the pursuers to fall back. When they finally breached the inner chamber, they found only a deactivated teleport homer of unknown pattern and a Dark Angels chapter seal dating to the Great Crusade era. The purging of Torsion V in the 34th millennium came even closer to success. A combined force of Deathwing Terminators and Ravenwing Black Knights, operating on intelligence from a captured Fallen, deployed directly into an abandoned Prometheum refinery where Cypher had established a temporary base. The operation initially proceeded perfectly, with Deathwing squads teleporting to block all known exits while Ravenwing units secured the perimeter. Tactical recordings show Cypher being physically restrained by two Deathwing Terminators, his weapons confiscated and limbs secured with gravitic shackles. What happened next remains heavily redacted even in Inner Circle records. Witnesses describe a localized warp disturbance that temporarily disabled power systems throughout the facility, including the Terminator's armor. When emergency systems reactivated 90 seconds later, Cypher had vanished, along with his weapons and, mysteriously, the helmet of one of the Deathwing sergeants. 3 days later, the same helmet was discovered in the private chambers of the Dark Angels chaplain who had organized the operation, with no explanation of how it had been transported across 20 light-years of space. The Archimedes confrontation of the 38th millennium represents perhaps the most significant near capture in the chapter's long history. Following a complex series of feints and false leads, Supreme Grand Master Anaziel personally led a strike force to the dying world of Archimedes, where intelligence suggested Cypher planned to access an ancient vault sealed since the Dark Age of technology. The resulting battle saw over 200 Dark Angels deploy against Cypher and a small group of apparent allies, a mixed force of renegade guardsmen and unidentified robed figures. Tactical recordings from this engagement show Cypher fighting with unprecedented desperation, sustaining multiple wounds as he attempted to reach the central vault. The Supreme Grand Master himself engaged Cypher in close combat, disarming him of his pistols and forcing him to his knees. Witnesses describe Anaziel demanding Cypher's surrender, offering the chance for redemption through confession. Cypher's response, though unrecorded, apparently caused the Supreme Grand Master to step back in shock, a moment of hesitation that proved critical. A massive explosion then breached the vault from within, releasing a blinding light that temporarily overwhelmed all picked recorders and auto senses. When visibility returned, both Cypher and the vault's contents had vanished, leaving behind only his discarded pistols, which were recovered and transported to the Rock for safekeeping. Most disturbing was the change observed in Supreme Grand Master Anaziel, who returned from the mission in a state of profound disturbance. He sequestered himself for 30 days before emerging to order all records of the encounter sealed under the highest level of chapter security. 3 years later, he disappeared during a routine warp transit, his fate remaining unknown. These repeated failures have taken a psychological toll on the Dark Angels that extends beyond mere frustration. Within the Inner Circle, a complex mythology has developed around Cypher, attributing to him capabilities that border on the supernatural. Some veterans speak of him in hushed tones as the Shadow of Caliban or the Walking Judgment, treating him less as a renegade Astartes and more as a force of nature, an embodiment of their chapter's unresolved guilt. The psychological impact extends to operational doctrine. Dark Angels commanders have developed increasingly elaborate protocols for Cypher-related deployments, often committing disproportionate resources to his capture. In several documented instances, ongoing campaigns against significant threats to the Imperium have been abandoned or delegated to other chapters when credible intelligence on Cypher's whereabouts emerged. This prioritization has occasionally placed the Dark Angels at odds with other Imperial organizations, particularly the Inquisition, who question the diversion of Astartes' assets from more pressing strategic concerns. Within the Unforgiven, the collective term for the Dark Angels and their successor chapters, knowledge of Cypher creates a complex web of obligation and secrecy. Each chapter maintains its own Deathwing and Ravenwing equivalents, bound by shared oaths to prioritize the capture of the fallen above all other concerns. When Cypher is detected, ancient protocols dictate that all nearby Unforgiven forces must respond, regardless of their current assignments or the strategic situation. This network of divided loyalties has created measurable operational inefficiencies that have not gone unnoticed by other imperial institutions. The Adeptus Administratum has documented numerous instances where Dark Angel's successors have abruptly withdrawn from joint operations or diverted from assigned patrol routes without explanation. The Ordo Hereticus maintains a dedicated monitoring program focused on these anomalous behavior patterns, though their investigations are frequently obstructed by the Dark Angel's political influence within the Adeptus Terra. The Inner Circle's knowledge of Cypher extends far beyond what is shared with even their trusted hunt teams. Ancient records preserved within the deepest vaults of the rock contain information about the original Lord Cypher of Caliban and the position's significance within the Order. These documents suggest that whoever bears the title carries knowledge that could either exonerate or irrevocably damn the Dark Angels in the eyes of the Imperium. Some of these classified records indicate that the Inner Circle has occasionally attempted communication with Cypher, rather than simply pursuing his capture. Encrypted Vox transmissions have been directed at him during encounters, using ancient Calibanite cipher codes known only to the highest-ranking Dark Angels. The content of these communications remains unknown, but the pattern suggests attempts at negotiation rather than demands for surrender. The most closely guarded secret, known only to the Supreme Grand Master himself, concerns the true purpose behind the hunt for Cypher. While the capture of all fallen angels serves to protect the chapter from revelations of their ancient shame, Cypher represents a unique threat beyond mere exposure. According to fragmentary records dating back to the immediate aftermath of Caliban's destruction, he carries knowledge regarding the fate of Lion El'Jonson himself, information that could potentially destabilize not just the Dark Angels chapter, but potentially the wider Imperium. This obsessive pursuit has created a curious symbiosis between hunter and hunted. The Dark Angels have structured significant aspects of their chapter organization around the capture of the fallen, with Cypher representing the ultimate prize. Yet there exists a tacit recognition among the oldest members of the Inner Circle that his capture might prove more devastating than his continued freedom. This paradox creates a psychological burden that manifests as increasing fanaticism down the chain of command, as younger officers seek to accomplish what their predecessors could not. For the Unforgiven chapters, Cypher has become a phantom that haunts their collective consciousness, a living reminder of ancient sins and unresolved questions. His continued evasion represents both failure and relief, challenging their self-image as the Emperor's most loyal sons, while simultaneously delaying a reckoning that might destroy them. This complex relationship has shaped the Dark Angel's development for 10,000 years, transforming what began as a temporary measure to contain knowledge of betrayal into the defining purpose of an entire chapter. The enigma of Cypher extends far beyond his elusive nature and unmatched combat prowess. Throughout Imperial history, his actions have formed a tapestry of contradictions that defies simple categorization as either ally or enemy. Unlike most fallen angels who either embrace chaos or live in hiding, Cypher operates with apparent purpose, appearing at pivotal moments in galactic history with uncanny timing that suggests more than mere coincidence. The seemingly contradictory nature of Cypher's interventions has confounded Imperial authorities for millennia. During the Macharian Crusade of the 41st millennium, Cypher was documented aiding Imperial forces against a chaos uprising on Demetrius IV, providing crucial intelligence that allowed Lord Solar Macharius's forces to break through heavily fortified enemy positions. Picked captures show him fighting alongside Imperial guardsmen, his twin pistols cutting down Chaos champions with methodical precision. Yet barely 3 months later, he was observed on Hydes Prime disrupting Imperial supply lines and sabotaging communication arrays just before a major offensive, actions that contributed directly to a significant Imperial defeat. This pattern of alternating assistance and opposition has been consistent across thousands of documented appearances. During the Third Armageddon War, Cypher was cited among Imperial defenders during the early stages of the conflict, his distinctive figure identified by Ordo Xeno's observers as he eliminated Orc infiltrators attempting to breach the Hive City's secondary generators. 2 weeks later, those same observers reported him extracting a group of suspected fallen angels from an Imperial detention facility, killing 17 Adeptus Arbites officers in the process. These contradictions extend beyond simple battlefield allegiance to the strategic implications of his interventions. Inquisitorial analysis suggests that Cypher's actions, while seemingly random, often produce cascading effects that alter the course of broader conflicts. The Sabbat Worlds Crusade provides a telling example. 3 critical battles during this massive Imperial campaign were preceded by Cypher sightings in supposedly secure command facilities. In each case, subsequent engagements saw Imperial forces making unexpected tactical adjustments that proved crucial to victory, suggesting information leaks that somehow benefited the Imperium despite representing serious security breaches. The 13th Black Crusade marked a significant escalation in Cypher's activities, and the first time his movements appeared to follow a clearly discernible pattern. In the decades preceding Abaddon's massive assault on the Cadian Gate, Cypher was cited with increasing frequency throughout the sectors surrounding the Eye of Terror. Inquisitorial reports document his presence at 17 different archaeological excavations on worlds with pre-imperial ruins, each visit followed by the disappearance of specific artifacts or data storage devices. As Abaddon's forces gathered for their push into Imperial space, Cypher's movements became more overt. He was observed on Nemesis Tessera, infiltrating a secure inquisitorial facility, though curiously, nothing was reported stolen. 3 weeks later, that same facility came under attack by a Chaos warband bearing the colors of the Word-Bearer's Legion. Survivors reported that the attackers focused exclusively on a vault section that had been empty since Cypher's visit, suggesting he had removed something the Chaos forces sought. The fall of Cadia represented perhaps the most significant and well-documented of Cypher's interventions. Multiple reliable witnesses placed him on the fortress world during the final days before its destruction. Unlike his typical pattern of brief appearances, Cypher remained on Cadia for an extended period, moving between different Imperial defensive positions. Guardsmen reported a hooded figure in ancient power armor providing targeting data that allowed their artillery batteries to strike at previously undetected Chaos formations. Several Cadian officers noted receiving encrypted tactical information from an unidentified source that proved crucial in repelling early Chaos assaults. Most significant was Cypher's confirmed presence during the activation of the pylons, the ancient Necron structures that temporarily closed the Eye of Terror and might have prevented Cadia's destruction had they remained operational. Mechanicus adepts monitoring the activation process detected an unauthorized access to the control system's moments before the pylons reached full power. The intrusion bore the same digital signature as previous system breaches attributed to Cypher. Whether this intervention helped or hindered the pylon's operation remains fiercely debated among Imperial scholars, with evidence supporting both interpretations. As Cadia broke apart under Abaddon's final assault, numerous evacuation craft reported a figure matching Cypher's description directing refugees to functioning transport vessels and holding off Chaos pursuers. The captain of the Imperial transport Righteous Deliverance provided testimony that a lone warrior in ancient Dark Angel's armor single-handedly defended a landing zone for nearly 7 hours, allowing thousands of civilians to escape before disappearing moments before the final evacuation shuttle departed. The gathering storm period following Cadia's fall saw Cypher's most brazen actions to date. As reality itself seemed to fracture with the birth of the Great Rift, he emerged from the shadows to join directly with Imperial forces under unexpected circumstances. Most notably, he appeared among a group of Dark Angel's prisoners being transported to the Rock for interrogation, having apparently allowed himself to be captured alongside genuine fallen angels. When the transport was attacked by Chaos forces, Cypher fought alongside his Dark Angel's captors, helping them secure an escape route before vanishing during the confusion of battle. This incident presaged his most controversial appearance, joining the unlikely alliance forged by Archmagos Belisarius Call, Inquisitor Greyfax, and Saint Celestine as they fled the ruins of Cadia. This disparate group, eventually accompanied by the resurrected Primarch Guilliman, fought their way across multiple war zones toward Ultramar. Throughout this journey, Cypher and his small band of hooded followers provided crucial support while maintaining a careful distance from the others, particularly Guilliman, who regarded their presence with open suspicion. The true purpose behind Cypher's temporary alliance with these Imperial heroes remains unclear. He reportedly informed Inquisitor Greyfax that he sought passage to Terra, where he had an offering for the Emperor. This statement aligns with one of the oldest theories regarding Cypher's ultimate goal, that he carries the broken sword of Lion El'Jonson and seeks to return it to the Emperor as a symbol of redemption or reconciliation. Others within the Inquisition suspected darker motives, particularly given the timing of his appearance during this period of unprecedented galactic upheaval. The alliance ended abruptly upon reaching Terra. As Guilliman prepared to meet with the High Lords and ultimately the Emperor himself, Cypher and his followers were arrested by the Adeptus Custodes, who cited ancient warnings regarding their admittance to the Imperial Palace. Before they could be fully processed, however, Cypher escaped custody under circumstances that remain classified at the highest levels. This incident created a temporary rift between Guilliman and the Custodes' leadership, suggesting the significance of Cypher's attempted access to the throne room extended beyond mere security concerns. In the aftermath of this failed journey to Terra, Cypher's activities took on a new dimension. As the Indomitus Crusade began pushing back against the forces of chaos across the fragmented Imperium, reports placed him in multiple war zones simultaneously, an impossibility that suggested either incredible speed of movement through the unstable warp, the existence of multiple individuals operating under the Cypher identity, or manipulation of Imperial intelligence networks. Most intriguing were his documented interactions with the Primaris Space Marines, the new generation of Astartes created by Belisarius Call and deployed by Guilliman to reinforce existing chapters. On no fewer than 7 occasions, Cypher was observed studying Primaris Marines in combat from hidden vantage points. In 3 instances, he directly engaged with isolated Primaris squads, though witnesses report these encounters involved conversation rather than combat before he disappeared again. The content of these conversations remains largely unknown, but fragmentary reports suggest Cypher questioned the Primaris Marines about their creation process, their implanted memories of chapter traditions, and specifically their knowledge regarding the Dark Angel's homeworld. These inquiries imply a particular interest in how the Dark Angel's chapter has integrated these new warriors who possess no direct link to Caliban or its secrets. Beyond his interactions with Imperial forces, Cypher has demonstrated a complex relationship with chaos entities that defies the typical corruption patterns seen in other fallen angels. During the Pandorax campaign, Alpha Legion forces were observed actively hunting Cypher through the jungles of Pythos, suggesting he represents a threat to certain chaos interests. Conversely, during the Diamer campaign, he appeared to coordinate activities with Word-Bearer's elements, though witnesses noted he maintained physical distance from Chaos Space Marines and never entered their ritual spaces. Perhaps most telling was an incident during the War of Beasts on Vigilus, where Cypher was sighted moving through chaos-held territory with apparent immunity. Cultists and even lesser demons seemed to actively avoid his path, while more powerful chaos entities diverted resources to track his movements. This unusual dynamic suggests Cypher occupies a unique position in the eyes of the ruinous powers, neither servant nor typical enemy, but something different that warrants special consideration. His relationship with Xeno's factions reveals similar complexities. During the Damocles Gulf conflict, Tau commanders reported encounters with an unidentified human operative who provided them with detailed information about Imperial defensive positions. The operative's description matches Cypher's known appearance, and subsequent Imperial investigations found evidence of his presence in compromised facilities. Yet during the same campaign, he was also documented eliminating Tau Pathfinders attempting to infiltrate a civilian evacuation site, actions that saved thousands of Imperial lives. More unusual are reported encounters between Cypher and Eldari forces. On multiple occasions, Eldari operations have adjusted course to avoid direct confrontation with him, suggesting foreknowledge of his presence and a deliberate policy of non-interference. During the defense of Craftworld Eatery, witnesses described a hooded figure in ancient power armor fighting alongside Eldari defenders against Tyrannid attackers, focusing particularly on protecting the Craftworld's Infinity Circuit. The Eldari themselves have never officially acknowledged these accounts, but certain inquisitorial scholars believe a connection exists between Cypher and specific Eldari prophecies related to the Final Blade and the Lion's Return. The constellation of Cypher's varied interventions across 10,000 years of Imperial history suggests a consistent purpose driving his actions, despite their apparent contradictions. Inquisitorial theorists have proposed numerous explanations, ranging from the mundane to the metaphysical. Some believe he simply acts to preserve his own freedom, intervening opportunistically to maintain the status quo that allows his continued operation. Others suggest more complex motivations, that he serves as an agent of balance, working to prevent either the complete triumph of chaos or the absolute dominance of the Imperium. The most compelling theory, supported by the pattern of his appearances at historically pivotal moments, is that Cypher operates according to some overarching plan that transcends simple allegiance to any current faction. His focus on ancient technologies, pre-imperial archaeological sites, and his apparent journey toward Terra suggest a mission connected to humanity's distant past and potential future. The sword he carries but never draws may represent not just a physical artifact, but a symbolic key to some greater purpose, yet to be revealed. Following Guilliman's resurrection, several documented sightings placed Cypher in proximity to locations associated with other loyal Primarchs. He was observed near the ruins of the Fang during a period when rumors of Lemon Russ's return circulated through the Fenris system. Later, he appeared on Chagoris just before a White Scars librarian experienced visions, reportedly showing Jagatai Khan emerging from the webway. Most recently, Imperial agents reported his presence on Macragge, accessing sealed chambers dating back to the Great Crusade, while Guilliman was campaigning elsewhere. These activities have led some within the Inquisition's Ordo Chronos to theorize that Cypher's ultimate goal relates to the scattered Primarchs, perhaps facilitating their eventual return or ensuring certain conditions are met before such returns occur. This would explain his interest in Guilliman's resurrection and his attempted journey to the Golden Throne, which houses not only the Emperor, but potentially the means to restore other Primarchs. The Dark Angels themselves maintain a different perspective on Cypher's purpose, one colored by their knowledge of Caliban's fall. Inner Circle documents suggest they believe Cypher seeks to expose their ancient shame, bringing the truth of the fallen angels to the wider Imperium, and thus destroying the chapter's reputation. This fear drives their relentless pursuit, yet contradicts Cypher's behavior. If simple exposure were his goal, he has had countless opportunities over the millennia to reveal what he knows to Imperial authorities. More nuanced interpretations within the Inner Circle suggest Cypher represents a final test for the Dark Angels, that his mission is one of redemption rather than destruction, offering the chapter a path to absolution if they can overcome their secretive nature and confront their past honestly. This theory would explain why he allows himself to be nearly captured on occasion, perhaps hoping that the right Supreme Grand Master will listen rather than simply attempt to silence him. As the 42nd millennium progresses and the Imperium faces unprecedented challenges, Cypher's activities continue to accelerate. Sightings have increased dramatically since the formation of the Great Rift, with multiple reliable reports placing him near sites of unusual warp activity or ancient technological significance. Whatever his ultimate purpose, the patterns of his movement suggest a plan entering its final phases, a culmination of 10,000 years of preparation coming to fruition in humanity's darkest hour. The theological implications of Cypher's existence extend far beyond the boundaries of a simple hunt for a traitor. Within the complex religious framework of the Imperium, where the Emperor is venerated as the divine savior of mankind, Cypher represents a profound theological contradiction, a figure whose very existence challenges the binary understanding of loyalty and betrayal that underpins imperial faith. The possibility that Cypher seeks forgiveness or redemption for the fallen directly challenges the Imperium's doctrine of irredeemable heresy. Imperial creed, as propagated by the ecclesiarchy, maintains that betrayal of the Emperor's trust represents an absolute sin for which no atonement is possible. This theological position serves a practical purpose, discouraging wavering faith by eliminating the possibility of redemption after heresy. Yet Cypher's apparent quest, carrying what many believe to be the lion's sword toward Terra, suggests a more nuanced reality where even the gravest sins might be forgiven. The chaplains of the Dark Angels maintain their own theological perspective on the fallen, distinct from mainstream imperial doctrine. Their rituals of interrogation and forced confession serve not merely as intelligence-gathering exercises, but as sacred rites of purification. When a fallen angel confesses his sins before death, Dark Angels believe this act partially cleanses the chapter's collective stain of dishonor. This practice reveals a theological framework where redemption remains possible, at least in death, even for those who participated in the betrayal of a Primarch. Cypher's mission, if indeed he seeks to return the lion's sword to the Emperor, represents an extension of this redemptive theology to its logical conclusion. Rather than individual absolution through confession, his journey suggests the possibility of collective redemption for all the fallen, perhaps even for the Dark Angels themselves. This concept has profound implications for the Unforgiven chapters, whose entire identity has been built around the hunt for their fallen brethren. If forgiveness could be granted collectively through Cypher's act, the very purpose that has defined them for 10 millennia would be rendered obsolete. The sword Cypher carries, but never draws, has become the focus of intense theological speculation. Analysis of picked captures showing the weapon's partially visible hilt and crossguard reveals design elements consistent with the Lion Sword, the personal weapon of Lion El'Jonson that disappeared during the final confrontation on Caliban. Metallurgical studies of fragments reportedly broken from the blade during various engagements suggest adamantium alloy composition with trace elements unique to Calibanite forges, supporting this identification. More controversial theories suggest the weapon may be instrumental in healing the Emperor or awakening Lion El'Jonson from his secret stasis deep within the rock. These theories draw connections between ancient Calibanite legends regarding the blade that heals and fragmentary references in the personal journals of the Primarch himself, which speak of a sword forged not to take life, but to restore it. While the Dark Angels officially dismiss such interpretations as heretical speculation, certain elements within their Reclusiam maintain research into these possibilities under the strictest secrecy. The sword's power field emitters, visible in detailed auger scans, show unusual configuration that differs from standard Imperial patterns. Tech priests who have analyzed this data suggest the field is designed to contain energy within the blade rather than project it outward as in typical power weapons. This containment function might explain why Cypher never draws the sword. Perhaps it holds energies that, once released, would trigger effects beyond his control. Some Mechanicus theorists propose the weapon might function as a psychic key or conduit rather than a conventional weapon, designed to interact with specific technologies or warp-based systems. Inquisitorial investigation has uncovered ancient Dark Angels texts that reference a ritual weapon called the Blade of Redemption, described as forged from the heart of Caliban and bearing the essence of the Primarch's purpose. These texts, dating to the early Great Crusade era, suggest the sword was created specifically to serve as a conduit between the Primarch and the Emperor, strengthening their psychic connection across vast distances. If these accounts are accurate, the weapon Cypher carries might represent more than mere symbolism. It could be a functional device designed to restore severed connections. The potential connection between this sword and the Golden Throne raises particularly sensitive theological questions. The Emperor's internment upon this ancient device has preserved his physical form while allowing his psychic presence to guide humanity through the Astronomicon. Yet this existence represents an incomplete state, neither truly alive nor dead, but suspended in eternal suffering. If Cypher's sword could somehow alter this condition, either by healing the Emperor's physical form or facilitating his final release, the implications for the Imperium would be staggering. Within Dark Angel's prophecies and eschatological traditions, Cypher occupies a position of ambiguous significance. The chapter's most closely guarded texts speak of the final messenger, who will emerge when the circle of betrayal is complete to bear witness before the throne of Terra. These prophecies, preserved by the chaplains of the inner circle, deliberately obscure whether this figure represents salvation or damnation, a harbinger of redemption, or the final agent of their shame being revealed. The potential consequences should Cypher reach the Emperor encompass both apocalyptic and salvific possibilities. If his purpose is truly redemptive, his audience with the Emperor might result in forgiveness for the fallen and healing for the Dark Angel's fractured legacy. Such an outcome would vindicate the minority within the inner circle who have argued for transparency and reconciliation rather than continued secrecy. Conversely, if his intent is to expose the full truth of Caliban's fall, the resulting crisis of faith could potentially destabilize the entire Unforgiven network and damage the broader Imperium's trust in first founding chapters. More radical interpretations suggest Cypher's mission connects to the Emperor's own possible resurrection or transformation. Certain heterodox imperial cults maintain that the Emperor's current state represents a chrysalis rather than stasis, that his suffering on the Golden Throne prepares him for eventual rebirth in a fully divine form. If Cypher's sword contains some essence of Lion El'Janson's loyalty or spiritual strength, it might serve as a catalyst for this transformation, perhaps even representing one piece of a larger process involving all the loyal Primarchs. The eschatological significance of Cypher extends beyond Dark Angel's prophecies to broader imperial apocalyptic traditions. The ancient text known as the Revelation of the Lion speaks of 9 loyal sons returning before the final battle, with the first among them bearing the Sword of Awakening. While officially considered apocryphal by the ecclesiarchy, this text has gained renewed attention since Guilliman's resurrection, with some theologians interpreting Cypher's mission as preparation for the Lion's own return as the second Primarch to awaken. Cypher's existence represents a profound challenge to the Imperium's understanding of loyalty and betrayal. In a culture where moral absolutes dominate, where one is either loyal or traitor, with no middle ground acknowledged, his ambiguous nature and contradictory actions suggest a more complex reality. His willingness to aid both imperial and enemy forces at different times demonstrates a moral framework beyond simple allegiance, perhaps guided by principles or objectives that transcend current factional divisions. This moral complexity mirrors the reality of the Dark Angels themselves, whose outward appearance of perfect loyalty conceals millennia of deception and extrajudicial operations. The chapter's obsessive hunt for the fallen represents their attempt to preserve a binary moral narrative, to categorize themselves as loyal while projecting all betrayal onto their lost brethren. Cypher's continued freedom and purposeful movements serve as a constant reminder that such simplistic categorization fails to capture the nuanced truth of their heritage. For the wider Imperium in the 41st millennium, Cypher embodies the uncomfortable reality that loyalty itself has become a contested concept. As the Imperium has drifted from the Emperor's original vision, transforming into a repressive theocracy he never intended, the meaning of loyalty to his ideals versus loyalty to the institutions claiming his authority has diverged. Cypher's actions, particularly his attempt to reach the Emperor directly, suggest he serves some understanding of loyalty that transcends current imperial power structures. The resurrection of Guilliman and his subsequent conflicts with various imperial institutions have brought this question of true loyalty into sharper focus. The returned Primarch has openly acknowledged that the modern Imperium represents a distortion of the Emperor's vision, yet still fights to preserve it as mankind's best hope for survival. This nuanced position mirrors the complexity Cypher has embodied for millennia, serving some greater purpose while navigating between opposing factions, neither fully embracing nor rejecting either side. As the Dark Imperium faces unprecedented threats from all sides, Cypher's potential role in awakening Lion El'Jonson gains new significance. The Lion's tactical genius and uncompromising loyalty would provide a powerful counterbalance to Guilliman's statesmanship and strategic vision. Together, the two Primarchs might begin to restore the Imperium to something closer to the Emperor's original design. If Cypher's mission involves facilitating this reunion, his actions across the millennia represent not betrayal, but the deepest form of loyalty, fidelity to the Emperor's ultimate vision, even when it required working outside corrupted imperial institutions. The theological implications extend further when considering the Emperor's own possible perspective on the fallen angels. If the Emperor remains conscious upon the Golden Throne, aware of developments across his Imperium, he has witnessed 10,000 years of the Dark Angel's obsessive hunt. The question arises whether this pursuit represents justice in his eyes or a tragic waste of resources driven by pride and fear. Cypher's apparent ability to evade Imperial authorities despite approaching Terra suggests the possibility that certain elements within the Adeptus Custodes, or even the Emperor himself, may not consider his capture a priority. As the final bearer of Caliban's truth, Cypher carries not just physical artifacts, but living memory of a world and time now lost to history. His existence preserves knowledge that might otherwise be forgotten, the reality of what occurred during Caliban's final days, untainted by the Dark Angel's carefully constructed narrative or the distortions of chaos. This role as witness makes him dangerous to those invested in controlling historical narrative, but potentially invaluable to any who seek genuine understanding of the past as guidance for the future. The mystery of Cypher ultimately reflects the larger mysteries at the heart of the Imperium itself, questions of the Emperor's true intentions, the nature of the Primarch's purpose, and whether mankind's current path represents salvation or slow damnation. As a figure who has observed the Imperium's evolution across 10 millennia while pursuing some hidden objective, Cypher embodies these unanswered questions. His continued journey, sword unbowed on his back, represents the persistence of truth even when suppressed or denied. Whether Cypher will eventually complete his journey to the Golden Throne, what reception he might find there, and what consequences would follow remain among the greatest uncertainties in the Dark Imperium. What seems increasingly clear is that his purpose connects to the larger fate of mankind in this time of unprecedented crisis. As the borders between real space and the warp grow thinner and ancient powers reawaken across the galaxy, the final acts of this mysterious figure may help determine whether humanity faces extinction or renaissance in the uncertain future that lies ahead. The sword remains undrawn, the truth unspoken, the journey unfinished. Yet as the pace of Cypher's movements accelerates and his appearances coincide with ever more significant events, the sense grows that some culmination approaches. After 10,000 years of patient preparation, the final bearer of Caliban's truth moves toward a destination only he can perceive, carrying with him the potential for either redemption or ruin. In his wake follow the haunted sons of the Lion, driven by fear of what he represents, yet perhaps, in their deepest thoughts, hoping for the absolution only he might deliver.